Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome the president of the Empire Club to the stage, Mr. Kent Amberson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, from Arcadian Court in downtown Toronto. Welcome to the Empire Club of Canada. For those of you just joining us through either our webcast or podcast, welcome to the meeting. John Chen and Amber Kanwar, I'm introducing them right now. Like all successful companies, BlackBerry continues to reinvent itself. And one of the main reasons this has happened is because of the leadership of John Chen. John, in his role as executive chairman and CEO of BlackBerry, is a major change agent. He has an impressive legacy at BlackBerry, including establishing a new market category called the Enterprise of Things, breaking records in the company's gross margin as well as software and services revenue. But most notably to all who know BlackBerry, and most Canadians who continue to root for BlackBerry's continued success, John has pivoted BlackBerry from a hardware company to a software and services company. Because of his new focus, BlackBerry software is now in 120 million cars, hundreds of millions of connected things, or drones, robots, cars, smart meters, medical devices, and documents. All of the G7 countries use BlackBerry software. And all of the largest Fortune 100 commercial banks use commercial software. Mr. Chen came to BlackBerry as a distinguished leader and has a proven turnaround executive with more than 30 years of engineering and management experience, along with a reputation that extends well beyond the BlackBerry industry and the technology industry. Prior to joining BlackBerry, John served as chairman and CEO of Sybase Incorporated. He reinvented that company too, and led it through 55 consecutive quarters of profitability, providing outstanding shareholder returns during his 15-year tenure. In 2017, Ascend Canada named John Executive of the Year for his outstanding contributions to BlackBerry, delivering business results, demonstrating leadership, and being at the forefront of innovation. He is named one of Canada's top 50 most powerful business people by Canadian Business in 2014. A global business leader with a strong interest in policy, John has testified before Congress on U.S.-China trade relations and was appointed by U.S. President George Bush to serve as the President's expert counsel. John is an active philanthropist. His charitable giving is focused on helping children. Amber Kanwar is an expert when it comes to financial markets and disruptive technologies. As a successful host of Business News Network's flagship morning show, Business Day AM, and co-host of CTV's The Disruptors, she has interviewed everyone from CEOs of major companies to startup technology entrepreneurs, fund managers, politicians, and thought leaders. Amber is a relentless digger, always looking for ways to break down complex topics and ideas and making them accessible to anyone who is interested. Amber has a Master's of Journalism degree from Ryerson University and a Bachelor of Management and Organizational Studies degree from University of Western Ontario. So today we're having a special event where Amber and John will be talking to us together on stage. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to John, Chen, and Amber Kanwar. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Ken, for that. And John, thank you for being here with us, and it's a pleasure to speak with you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I guess I always hate when they read the bio. How do you feel? Yours is quite impressive. Are you just beaming?
On the bio?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I think it's missing a bunch of accomplishment, but
there could be more. There could always be more.
But anyway, but in the interest of time, we'll just let it be.
One of the things that Ken said about me is that I break down complex things and make them accessible. And it feels like one of the complex things these days is explaining what is BlackBerry? Because it was really easy back in the day. They made smartphones. And now you're going into all these different markets. And I wonder how you answer that question when people ask, when I'm asking, how do you explain what BlackBerry is today?
Well, the top line is we're trying to pivot BlackBerry into a security software and services company. That's the top line. Then the next line down is that a particular market that we like to serve that you all know as the IoT market, Internet of Things, and I'm going to break it down to, yesterday I was at New York Stock Exchange speaking to a number of customers, and I thought the right narrative, and since we're so many Canadians here, I think you will resonate with that, especially some of the former colleagues in the room here. I think if you kind of look at the trend of the industry, there are two things that's happening. It's a very simple thing, nothing technologically complicated. Number one is everything wants to talk to everything. Okay, so that's number one. And that created this whole Internet of Things, but it's just how you talk to each other. And the second thing is, and which is, I know is now a hot topic at Toronto, which is about privacy and security. So not only does everything want to talk to everything else, but they want to talk it in a way that is controlled privacy and security. So I think BlackBerry has every right to be the platform of choice for that evolution. So we want to focus on the communications of that. That's a much longer answer, but it's more of a layman answer than all these buzzwords about technology. It really is about facilitating secure communication between things, and then then everything. There's a lot of thinking on it. Now let me spend a minute. I promise you, this is the only commercial that I will do for BlackBerry. I promise you that. The reason why this is important is because you all need to know. If you everybody thinks BlackBerry is a handset company. At least in 2007, everybody thinks so. So what is more important about a handset was what drove the handset success. So BlackBerry had invented a number of very significant technology that the world actually, either some was still trying to keep up or trying to get to. Some of them, have benefited from it. One of the technology was this whole wireless infrastructure and communications. Well, guess what? If you want everything to talk to each other, you need that infrastructure and technology. The other one is cryptology. I don't know how many of you know that BlackBerry still owns a company, is still the number one cryptology company in the market, called Certicom. It's actually out of Ottawa, and I don't know how many people actually know that. So that's another thing. That provides the security protocol. And most recently, we made an announcement about 2-3 weeks ago in New York about working with another company, actually funded by Mike Lesser and built by a lot of the former colleagues of BlackBerry, called Icera. And we're attempting to recognize quantum computer hacking. And this is going to be a big deal sometime in the future. But I just want to impress you that we're way ahead of some of the games. And so that's a second thing. So there are a number of inventions that BlackBerry had created to allow these cell phones to talk to each other securely, and you get email everywhere in the world, and you get great coverages in terms of signal coverages and the likes. And then, of course, we should never forget about the keyboard and the thing that never needs any charging. All these technology are useful to what we're talking about here. How does things talk to each other securely? And I really do believe there is no other company today is focusing on that particular problem, nor is there any company have the birthrights other than BlackBerry that could do this. And so we're very excited about it, but it causes another kind of minor revolution in our company, because we went from building hardware to exporting software, so to speak, and then we went from there to really try to figure out how to build a communication platform. Lots of words.
I'll take your free
advertising. You can break it down. You like
I'll
to
take
break
your
it down.
free advertising, but essentially the trend is there. Things are going to be connected, and you're going to want to do that securely. And I think we've seen that. So my question to you is then, why don't you have more customers? What has been the difficulty in translating, if you see that market opportunity, to bigger numbers for BlackBerry?
Well, we have 20,000 customers. I don't know what more.
I think you want more than that.
Well, we do.
You want them to pay
I don't
more?
want you to leave the impression that we don't have customers.
Yes, yeah.
We got 20,000. We are extremely well known in the auto industries. We're 120 million cars using our software today, and they're mostly connected cars, and in the future, a number of autonomous platforms, including ones in China, ones in Japan, ones in Germany, one in the United States, and so forth. So I think the future will continue to be a dominant player in that. We're very strong in governments. I just wish the Canadian government would buy more. This is a budgetary thing. But we're very strong in government. That's just like in Washington, D.C., we got 4 million people, civilian and military people connected to our system, and we manage crisis management. Just in the Department of Defense was 2.3 million. That included basically most of all the armed forces that you could think of. So, these are not publicized facts, but it's not a secret either. I used it with customer. So we have pretty good customer base. Now,
I guess what I'm asking is, why isn't the growth exploding? Because the growth in connected things is exploding, and it feels like the need for security is getting more and more real every day. So why isn't the growth exploding? Is it because the technology is growing, but it's not there yet, and there are bugs to work out, or because we talk a lot about security, but people aren't willing to pay up for it?
It's interesting. I think we're still a little early because people still tend to, when things talk to each other, so far things still are more in the family. For example, I don't know how many folks shamefully use this iPhone. And, AirDrop is not exactly connecting with Samsung or BlackBerry device. You could AirDrop to each other, but it's not. So people are still very, kind of silo-minded.
Walled gardens.
Yes, walled garden. Good point. And so we are looking for a different trend. We're looking for a trend that we really need, and especially enterprise, really needs everything to talk to each other. And so this is still early. But judging from the speed of things that could connect, that are being created every day, it will come soon. So it's a forthcoming thing.
Let's talk about cars, because you mentioned how prevalent you are there. You're in the cars, and I think you're trying to get more out of, what is it? Is it $10 per car, roughly? Yes, 10, for BlackBerry technology, and you'd like to be $20 per car or higher. How do you get there, and how do you compete with the people that are already in the car? Are you doing something different than the other technology that's in there?
Okay, so currently, so-called the average per user is somewhere sitting about $3 to $5. This BlackBerry acquired a company called QNX in Ottawa from Harman. Harman now belongs to Samsung, but it's a tier 1 company. What are the tier 1 company? They build components for car manufacturers, loosely called as OEM. So, BMW will say to Bosch or Harman to say, okay, I need a dashboard. So here's the spec of the dashboard. Then these people go build this dashboard, and in there they will insert QNX code. Why is that? Because QNX is the only safety certified operating systems in the market. So this is why everybody uses QNX, and especially in more the safety and mission critical area. So the company, when I first joined, we're very focused on taking this piece of code and put it in the cell phone. And actually, many of you have touched that cell phone called BB10, and so you have the Q10, Z10, Z30, Classic, Passport. those are all BB10 devices. In there is one of the world's safest operating systems there is. So when the crew came and take a look at the strategy and said, well, the cell phone has limited market appeal. A bigger market will be in this whole new transportation movement, which is connected cars and autonomous driven cars. So we start working on there. But we still very much focus on something called the infotainment systems. This is the system that control your CD and your maps and all these little things. And that it's been growing quite well. It's still growing. We still have a growth last quarter, but it's not a high growth area. And in addition to that, there are some really qualified competition because this doesn't really highlight safety. So the strategy that we had 3 years ago was starting to create safety components. When you said all these other things, these are telematic systems and over-the-air, vehicle-to-vehicle communications, and so the list goes on. Virtual cockpit and all that, and so they're more towards mission critical and safety. And we also created something called a hypervisor, which is important for the future. So with that, since we charge by components, this is how we're going to move this so-called ARPU from maybe $3 to $5 that's declining to more like $10, $15, $20. And in addition to that, we have a long list of plans to create services. Think about, how do you know the car is not hacked, and who manages all that safety and all that. We would like to be part of that. And so there are a lot of opportunities yet to be executed.
What you just described is really fascinating. You had this technology, and then as you came in, you're deciding, well, it doesn't really apply to this market, or it applies to a market that's dying, smartphones for Blackberry. So how can we pivot it to other things? So autos. You also do asset tracking, healthcare. That's a lot of different industries that require different things. So in addition to selling to them, what is it like to do that as a company, the innovation culture at Blackberry? Do you try and set a tone where it's okay to fail? Because presumably these people have worked there, they did one thing, and now all of a sudden you're going to these different markets. That's a really difficult thing, to pivot an entire company in new, uncharted directions. It sounds like you've had to bob and weave a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of it's a lot of care and feeding and adjustment. If there is a criticism of myself, I actually let engineering people run wild. And the salespeople always criticize me of letting the engineers go engineer. And they engineer things like, because first of all, being biased, I was an engineer, I was trained as an engineer, I was an engineer for many years. I know creativity cannot be legislated. I know you can't say you have to do a design. I mean, it's kind of like you were talking to a writer. Say, you're gonna write a book in 30 days, and it has to be this, and that. The writers, most of the time, especially a good one, will come up with a formula-driven book, which will sell nothing. You want to have some kind of breakthrough, you really do need to let the engineers or developers go develop. And so I usually don't force, you have to do this by then, unless there's a major customer milestone involved. And even then, I try not to create a culture of, well, we'll do whatever, we do anything for a deal. I think that's taken to an extreme, hurts a company. And so yes, that culture exists in the company. And we have more engineers than salespeople, which is part of my problem, because our channel and reach is not as good as it should be. That may go back to your earlier questions about how come you don't grow better, but so we have a different philosophy.
Yes.
There is that culture, and it needs to be balanced, and it needs to be managed, and That's probably the answer.
So how do you, because the pressure to perform is so great, because you get questions like, why don't you have more customers from people like me? And then how do you deal with something, you see all those opportunities that don't work out? I remember talking to you a few years ago about BBM, and this is when Facebook paid, $17 billion for WhatsApp. 19 billion. Can't miss those two. And that got people excited because they were excited about the possibility for BBM. And these days, what happened? What happened to that?
This is one of those things that I don't agree with Trump, but there's some kind of it's not a fake news, but the media like to take things out of context. Let me explain to you what exactly happened. I was at Mobile World Congress the day that Facebook announced that they will buy WhatsApp for $19 billion. I was interviewed by CNBC, and they asked how do I feel about it. I said, if somebody wanted to pay me $19 billion for BBM, I would sell it in a heartbeat. Right? And then somewhere along the line, that become like one of my goals that my board laid out. You need to sell BBM for $19 billion, right? And it's like, wait. I was responding to an answer of something that I actually don't know. Okay, I showed up in Barcelona, and they said, oh, by the way, Facebook just bought WhatsApp at $19 billion. What do you think about that? I said, I have the same technology. If they want to pay me $19 billion, I certainly will sell it. I guess this is probably too much humor for media. You still remember?
I think I have a sense of humor, but I will go back because I also asked you that question.
You did.
And you did talk optimistically about this being a meaningful contributor to revenue.
Yes.
It is not?
Well, how do you know that? We never disclose that.
Well, I would assume if it was meaningful, you would disclose it.
We have a partner taking BBM consumer around the world, starting in Indonesia. The speed is not as good as we would have wanted. That's a true statement. We also took BBM into enterprise, called BBM Enterprise. The entire Canadian civil service is on BBM Enterprise. BBM Enterprise is being used by how Canadian government operates today. And we wanted to take it to beyond. I appreciate Canadian government support, but we need to do better than that. I would agree that it hasn't lived up to its potential yet. We're not going to give up on BBM Enterprise because this is how we operate too in our own company.
We'll stick with the microscope.
So wait. If your question implied that how do I feel about being asked of the failure or lack of
traction for BBM, compared to your own forecast, when you first came in, you were very optimistic about this being, I think it was $100 million.
Oh, then actually, I'm not going to disclose it. We're not too far away from that.
Okay, so you got close.
Right. So I'm hoping for more. I would say, but all joking aside, there are things that didn't work out. There's no question about that. And that's the nature of the technology business. We should never we should never shy away from trying. And set up goals that could be transparent with others. I recently, last quarter, said that for the next 3 years, we have this asset tracking system that uses the cloud technology that we feel very good about and very proud of. All built in Canada, by the way. And we believe we could, in 3 years, we can make $100 million cumulatively, right? For $100 million. And we don't do more than $5 million a year today. So we're putting a plan to do that. It might work, it might not work, but I think having a realistic goal, maybe a little loftier, then it's good for our company. It's good for our employees, it's good for our company. And even if I don't make $100 million, I make $75 million. It's certainly a lot better than $5 million a year. So I think this is quite normal.
So when you first walked in the door as CEO, you weren't facing the right markets. I'm hearing you say that it feels like today you've got the product and you're facing the right markets. And now, what is the next step? now that that's happening?
Well, we got the company financially quite stable. We make money, we generate cash, we got quite a bit of cash in the bank that, I think our net cash is $1.7 billion, versus a number of years ago, that was a problematic area. We're improving our margin quite a bit, so we're poised to invest. Another way to say it is we have to grow the top line. Now, we could grow in one of many different ways. We could grow by organically creating, like for example, get into, in addition to getting into automobile, get into the drones, for example. Or, we're building some, one project we're toying with is maybe you SF track air cargo. Air Canada is one of the largest air, cargo transportation vendor. So those things could be, we're focusing on doing some of those stuff. So this is organically. So invest in our own technology and grow into a different vertical. The inorganic is, given the amount of money that we have, although the stock market is a little crazy in terms of multiples, we will do some reasonably significant investment.
In public market companies?
Well, in public or private, but the multiple, for those of you in the room, in a financial market, if the valuation kept it up there, or the private company, before they go IPO, we might buy them.
So there's been a little bit of a sell-off. I don't know if you noticed that. Has that created things that are a bit more active than in your portfolio? Have they come back down to more reasonable levels?
The sell-off has been quite short-lived. I need the market to crash.
I feel like there's a bunch of people.
Maybe you don't, but on behalf of BlackBerry, you see, we got 1.7 billion or 2.4 billion or whatever it is, and the board's very supportive to do the right transformational deal. You could say there's a lot of money. You could say that's actually not enough. When you show up buying with some cash, you would like the price to be more reasonable. So, a crashing market, let us buy it, and then it will go back up again. We will look like heroes.
Well, there's a lot of things that could crash the market, and I guess we can transition there into politics, because it's on those headlines that a lot of these things move. And I know that you have been involved, and Kent mentioned that you've been involved with the Republican Party in different ways, but you've been vocally against Donald Trump.
Whoa. This is on tape.
So were the comments, I believe.
I can't agree with you on that statement, but go ahead.
Disagreeing on different principles, then. Maybe that's a better way to say it. So as we sit here today, and perhaps talking in Canada, now that we have the NAFTA deal done, what do you make of the administration, the accomplishments, and what it means for business leaders, particularly in Canada? There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of hand-wringing, rhetoric, and then at the end of the day, with NAFTA, a deal got done.
Yeah, I think people have asked me before. I know this U.S.-Canada deal will get done. I mean, first of all, if you look at the two countries, the supply chain is so integrated. I don't know how you separate the two. It's almost worse than the scale of the whole Brexit conversation. I don't even know how you so. I know the deal will be done. I'm glad the deal's done, and I'm actually glad that not much change really. We know from day one the U.S. administration is going after the pharmaceutical industry. It really is about the generics versus, and that's seems to be the central theme of that new agreement. I guess letting Americans to sell a little bit more cheese and milk, it's probably okay, and in the overall scheme of the GDP comparison, that's minute. It's not even a count. And then we have a long list of IP resolutions, procedural thing. And I think, those are really reflecting of the current practice anyway. So nothing really, earth-shattering and significant has changed. And so the deal's done.
But it didn't sound like that, right? You're right. The end product doesn't seem like it was worth all that drama that took place. As a business leader, it sounds like you just sat down and thought practically about what could happen and ignored the drama. Is that what you did? Or were there points where either you or other members of the C-suite were thinking, what is going on here?
No, I think, first of all, I have personally met with various ministers and expressed what will be important to BlackBerry. I've done that a number of times, including our trade negotiator and the team. But I never, you don't really react to things that until it's negotiated. You just want to make sure that the Canadian government knows what could hurt us. And they're very receptive to that set of input. So, it all turns out to be a good outcome. Did
you feel like the Canadian team did a good job in terms of hearing from the corporate community, but then also executing? I don't know about for others. For BlackBerry, yes, I feel very satisfied with the receptivity. Our legal team had worked with the negotiation team. I have met with the ambassadors to the United States. I have met with Minister Freeland a number of times. I have met with Minister Bain. I met with a number of the key important constituents in that, and they seem to be extremely receptive to, very friendly about, very open about our what's important to us. Does it matter to you if there is a perception or a reality that relations are strained? Does it affect you as a business leader if the U.S. relations with Canada are strained, or the U.S. relations with anybody, because you have big presence in the United States, is strained with any global country that matters for business?
Yeah, that needs to be watched, and we do watch it very carefully. You'll have to look at it in a couple of areas. Number one is United States and Canada have very deep relationship on military cooperation. Canada is the first line of defense for NORAD. In amount of military ranks on both countries, they actually observe each other's ranks. Right? So as long as that relation doesn't change, all the other things kind of doesn't really matter. Part of the reason, very selfishly, I'm paid for by BlackBerry, so I'm only speak for BlackBerry. We do an enormous amount of work with armed forces in the United States, and as I said earlier, we got 2.3 million users in the U.S. armed forces under the Department of Defense. To us, that relationship being looked at as friends rather than foe is of ultimate importance to us, and I can't stress the more important that. Second level is the whole Five Eyes country. This is one of the reasons why, despite the fact that China is a huge market, we don't do a lot in China other than autos, because we are very sensitive to not violating or creating distrust or concern from the Five Eyes country, which are Australia, New Zealand, UK, Canada, and United States. But those are our major market, federal. So those are the second thing. And then they'll have the G15 or the G20. So you could probably figure out why I left out 5. But so that's also extremely important. So when we do our kind of go-to-market mapping and where resources is, and those are the important consideration.
You mentioned China, and that's an interesting area. It's also very topical. So it's a huge market. Everybody is salivating at the opportunity to be there. But you said there are some compromises that we won't make. And just recently, Google, well, whether they wanted to admit it or not, there was some sort of search engine project for China. And previously, they were very almost took a moral stance against going in there because of surveillance and things like that. What is BlackBerry's stance and approach to those kind of things, operating in any country where a state would want access to the content that people are using, whether it's enterprise or consumer?
Okay, good question. I can't speak for Google. I don't work there. I could speak for BlackBerry. From day one, before my time, and since I came, I took a very strong review and interest in this because I knew this is going to be more and more of important issues. And a couple of things you need to know. We have always been an observer of something called the lawful access. And we will continue to maintain that if we need to help the government with a subpoena on doing something to help the society, at least the government deemed feeling that way, we will then do what we can to support it. So this is why,
but that means different things in different countries.
That implies different things in different countries. And where you operate is important. Now we go back to where I operate. I operate.
I see where you're taking me.
The 5i and the G15.
Yeah.
So I operate differently. So those countries, as long as the leadership and the democratic process doesn't change, and the court system is independent, judiciary, that doesn't change, then yes, we will still maintain our lawful access position. We will maintain that. I had one time exercise when Pakistan, early in my career here at BlackBerry, when Pakistan would want to have a unlock key basically on every server, we have made a tough decision of removing ourselves from the market. We fortunately, at the very last minute, between the Pakistan communication authorities and our company, we reached on a lawful access consensus. So that went on pretty well. So we didn't end up leaving, but we would have left.
You're prepared to.
Yeah, we're prepared to exit. And we'll do the same thing with everywhere else where we do business.
Before we open it up to the floor, I want to ask you about emerging technology. So you've talked a lot about being in vehicles. How far, in your opinion, is autonomous driving? Is that a real and sustainable trend? Do you think that people want?
It's definitely real. I think everybody home into the technology. The technology could be here. Is it 100%? No. But it will save life. And so even in today's technology, the cost of manufacturing may be higher than most people would like to pay, but most likely that's going to find itself into more commercial. For example, autonomous truck. Okay, there's a hard time finding truck drivers, high cost of truck, and so maybe it's more commercial driven in the beginning, and then more consumer driven. But the issue is not technology. It's not even about cost. The issue about policy, and I really believe the policy and governments around the world, and even in Canada and the United States, have definitely fell behind the technology trend. You could talk about this area. So, for example, you put a car out autonomously, the definition of safety is important. Who managed that safety? And by the way, today you and I pay for car insurance. So when we have an accident in an autonomous vehicle, you haven't done anything. Even if you're drinking like a horse, you still haven't done anything yourself. Who's supposed to bear the liability? I don't think the government has defined that. And I would say, if I said none of us should pay for insurance, and nobody should, I think the insurance, I don't know how many people here from the insurance industry will go crazy because, they rely on our paying our premium. And so there's a whole bunch of social changes and policy changes needed. I know one of the things that, Toronto is dealing with is this whole area about privacy and this smart city that Google likes to donate to the Canadians. You know, anything that's free has a problem. But, you know, that's a different issue. And I know our founder, former CEO, had made some very strong comments on paper. But the point is, what it really prompted is the government needs to have not only the autonomous-driven, the safety, policy, but also needs to drive, the data privacy policy. So those things aren't here, and I'm looking forward for that.
Is there a place that you think is in the forefront? Is there a city or a state you think they're all?
I think everybody, in the United States, every state is trying to do something about it, and it's uncoordinated. It'll be ridiculous to have this set of policy. Think about my car. It's being driven autonomously. It leaves California and gets to Arizona and stopped because you're not allowed on certain things. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, anyway, nobody is ahead. I always ask policymaker, the autonomous vehicle could be a great possibility. It saves lives, it saves time, and it increased productivity. There's no question about that on a stack basis. Doesn't mean that does not imply that there is no accident, okay? But it's a lot less accident than today. But the issue is going to have to be policy and infrastructure.
Let's go back to, I think you raised your eyebrows at that Google Smart City. So what would be your advice or, well, let's just call it advice.
Well, I don't know in what area. I mean, it's a complex subject. So
what makes you fearful or skeptical about it?
I have a few principles myself. I mean, this may or may not speak for Blackberry altogether, but I have a principle. First of all, my data is mine. And I don't mind trading you. If you want me to trade for free services, like, you want me to give up my location for Uber, okay, I have to make that decision myself. And by the way, by giving up Uber, giving my location to get the services like Uber, that does not mean that I want to give up my bank account information, nor do I want to give up my medical information. I think this is one of those things that I've seen arguments on both sides. I read it. I think you need to talk more substantive rather than big picture. Oh, I will never use your data. Well, that's complete fiction. I try to use a different word, but I know I'm on tape, though. That's complete fiction because the reason is, from a Google and a lot of the equivalent type of company, the business model is your data is worth something. So you are the product. You think you are using their services, but you actually are the product, right? So that's one problem. And then this other area that people say, and I read most recently, I'm not trying to criticize the individual, and they said, we promised that everybody had the rights to use the data the same way. This is kind of the latest thing. Well, that's even more ridiculous. And the reason is, if I come in and rob your house, so I promise that everybody will rob your house the same way, coming through the same door or the window. Excuse me, you're not supposed to come rob my house in the first place, right? So anyway, so the point is, this is a very touchy topic, but it really does need the country to go more granular of what it means.
All right, thank you, John Chen, for those always very forthright comments. Before we end, do we have time for one or two questions from the floor? I think one or two, yeah, just one. It's you back there.
John, curious as your thoughts. Obviously, this is on Huawei and its network equipment in the Canadian 5G deployment. Obviously, the U.S. bipartisan Senate, and maybe the only bipartisan thing they've done, has encouraged Canada to not let Huawei in. To you, does that read like a legitimate threat to Canadian data security, or is it protectionism?
I actually don't know the answer to your question. There was this whole article about microchip in some of those servers that, this is beyond the Huawei conversation, that the Chinese made that was somehow found its way in the Amazon infrastructure and a number of different infrastructure and Apple infrastructure, and then they deny that. I think, you know, technologically it's easy to certify whether that Huawei machine have code that trap and collect data. I'm sure that it'll be, you know, easier to do that. So without knowing that, you know, it could be more political than otherwise, in my opinion. But I think Huawei needs to step up and somehow, just like when the Chinese thought or accused many years ago that Microsoft had traps in the code, and what Bill Gates did was he threw over there and said, "I'll show you my entire code." And I think that needs to have some kind of gesture in that way, so the government could go in and understand the architecture and so forth, and find a way to make sure that future changes will adhere to that policy. So if I'm running Huawei, this is what I would do.
All right, and that concludes our talk. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention and your interest.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to invite up Michael Van Solen, the third vice president of the Empire Club, to give the thank you to our speakers.
Well, it's a great honor to have the opportunity to thank BlackBerry CEO John Chen for his remarks. They were very insightful. Of course, for all of us in the room, we recognize that BlackBerry is such an iconic brand. And I think for Canadians, you know, maybe more than others, we hold it kind of closer in our mind, and it means something, you know, of greater depth to each of us. You know, we remember, I suppose, many of us in this room, the first time we got a BlackBerry device, and, you know, how much that changed our lives, how we felt untied to our desk, and, you know, I think immediately realized that it was going to change how we communicate with each other, how we access information, just how go about our daily lives. And it's the fact that BlackBerry did bring the smartphone in the way it did and pioneered it that has made the company such an icon that it is today. It was actually over Thanksgiving weekend. I have a bunch of family in the Guelph, Elora area that and we went down to St. Jacob's Market, and I kind of had a chance to kind of tootle around a bit. And I saw the BlackBerry campus again, which had been quite a while since I'd been there. And I realized, I was reminded of how big it was. And I thought of all the smart minds that have gone through there, that work there today. I thought of the engineers running wild. No, that's your words. And I realized how important that BlackBerry has really been to making Canada the tech hub and the tech center it is today. I don't think Montreal or Toronto or Ottawa or Waterloo would be quite what they were if it wasn't for that pioneering work that BlackBerry first did. And then in listening to you, of course, today, I realized that probably your bigger pioneering days are yet ahead. And I think BlackBerry is continuing to have a huge impact in the tech culture in this country. As a company, it's growing, moving into areas that go well beyond, you know, what I would have ever imagined when I first held that BlackBerry Bold in my hand. So we really appreciate that. The work you're doing with QNX in the cars, trying to figure out quantum computing and hacking. You know, I really think BlackBerry continues to be a leader and a real, you know, for Canada, I think it's still a flagship brand that we're very, very proud of. So while the BlackBerry phone seemed revolutionary, you know, a few years ago, today my car talking to my refrigerator, I suppose, is equally impressive. So to Amber Kanwar for hosting, and to John Chen on behalf of the Empire Club of Canada, thanks so much for coming out today.
Okay, we have a number of events coming up. The sold-out event is of Minister Rod Phillips is on October 29th, the Minister of the Environment. We also we just launched an event yesterday. Minister Peter Bethenfalvy President of the Treasury Board, and that's on November 7th. So tickets are going fast for that one, but if you'd like to come back, we'd love to have you. So thank you, everyone, for coming today and for making this event possible. Thanks again to our sponsors, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.